Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband News. The NTIA has released some preliminary guidance for the performance testing that subgrantees or internet service providers are going to have to do when they accept BEAD funding to build a broadband network. I'll be right back with more on that. And thank you again for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband News. So if you have already accepted money for CAFII or RDOF, this performance testing should look familiar because it's modeled around that, what the FCC has done on those two programs. So the NTIA is not trying to invent the wheel here. So again, you would be familiar with a lot of this probably already, but if you haven't done that, you should check this out. In the description of the video, I did link to this document. So again, this is draft pre-decisional, so they're saying that there could be changes, so don't count on this yet. And they'd be accepting comments on this, but again, it's something that is very similar to what's been done prior for CAFII and RDOF testing. So I was going to take a quick look, and let's just read through a few portions of this. So you see here, NTIA is seeking comment from the public on this proposed guidance. If you wish to provide comment, you can submit an email there by midnight on December 19th. Again, please note that these are draft documents, so eligible entities, that would be the states, and the territories may not rely on NTIA guidance until it is finalized. So again, this is the states are all going to have to make sure that their subgrantees, the broadband providers that are going to be building the BEAD-funded networks, provide this regular testing on an ongoing basis during the period. I'm assuming it's 10 years, if it's similar to RDOF and CAF. So I can't remember if that was in here, but again, we'll read through a little bit of this. So the states are going to be implementing or requiring this, and there's some leeway as you read through this where they can make the requirements a little bit more strict. They can't make them less strict, but they can make them more strict if they want more testing, those kinds of things. So you see here, there's a table of contents, and then we'll read through some of this. So this policy notice's approach leans heavily on well-established FCC practices and is designed to minimize administrative burdens on states and subgrantees. I don't know, and a lot of the folks would say this is kind of administratively burdensome. And this is one of the reasons I think that some smaller ISPs that have not participated in, let's say, CAF and RDOF in certain areas, maybe are looking at BEAD and giving it, having second thoughts about that would be because of certain things, and some of that might be performance testing and trying to figure out how you're going to do all of this. So BEAD-funded last-mile broadband deployment projects are required to meet specific capacity, latency, and reliability standards. Network speeds must reach or exceed 100 megabits per second download and 20 meg upload for broadband serviceable locations, and 1 gig per second for both download and upload for community anchor institutions. To comply with the latency standard, a provider's certified test results must show for each state or territory that 95% or more of all tests of network round-trip latency are at or below 100 milliseconds. Last-mile networks must not be unavailable for more than 48 hours over 365 days. That's a long time to be not available. So the speeds here, it says, the speeds must reach 100 by 20, but that's in an area where maybe an ISP is committed to 100 by 20. If they've committed to something higher, whether it's a community anchor institution or just last mile broadband to a residential home, if they've committed to provide gigabit broadband service as part of their bid to be able to get the funds, then when they're testing, they have to meet that, not just 100 by 20. So it's based on the committed amount. Because many providers participating in or likely to participate in the BEAD program are also subject to FCC USF rules through the Connect America Fund Phase 2 action or the Rural Digital Opportunity or RDOF Fund. The BEAD NOFO adopts the existing FCC performance measurement methodologies from those programs. So yeah, there are a lot of folks that are in rural areas that have gotten some RDOF and CAFII money, but there's a lot of folks that haven't. So again, this is going to be new to those that have not gotten or not been participating in RDOF or CAFII. Measurement obligation, all subgrantees must collect measurements twice a year during the period of performance and the subsequent federal interest period. And there's some notes there we might take a look at. Sample size, the number of subscriber connections to be tested is based on the number of subscribers at BEAD locations for each broadband technology. So each broadband technology, so you could be doing fiber in one area and fixed wireless in another, for example, and committed speed tiers across the state or territory. So if you have two committed speed tiers, if you got 100 by 20 in one and you got a gig in another, or maybe 500 symmetrical in one, you've got to do tests in each of those because you've got a different committed speed. Subscribers are counted across all projects of a subgrantee in a state or territory, not separately for each project. Subgrantees with 50 or fewer active subscribers at BEAD locations for a technology and committed speed tier within each state or territory must test at least 5 locations, so hopefully they have more than 5 customers. Those with 51 or more active subscribers must test at least 10% of the total subscribed locations. The sample locations sharing the same technology and committed speed tier are referred to as a sample set. So those are grouped based on that technology and the speed tier. For alternative technologies, for example, technologies not considered reliable broadband service, states may require a larger sample set or may require that specified geographical areas, such as census blocks, groups, or BEAD project area, contain a minimum number of sample locations. So that would be, for example, satellite. Unlicensed, completely unlicensed fixed wireless spectrum would be in that category. And then satellite service would be an alternative technology that's not considered reliable broadband service. Committed speed tiers and technologies. The committed speed tier for all projects is governed by the subgrantee agreement. States may require a commitment in the subgrantee agreement to provide higher speeds where that provider received points or credits during the application process for that service level. Since the performance and reliability of different last-mile technologies may differ, a subgrantee that offers service relying on multiple different technologies or has committed to multiple different speed tiers must sample locations for each technology and committed speed tier separately. However, if a provider offers different tiers above or below the committed speed tiers for sale, these do not have to be sampled separately. So if you are a service provider and you went ahead and put in your grant application, and let's say you said it was going to be a gig symmetrical, and you're also going to be offering a half a gig and maybe 100 symmetrical, and you're also going to offer, let's say, 5 gig. You don't need to worry about the 5 gig or anything below 1 gig. If you committed at 1 gig, that's what you need to be testing. That's what it's saying there. The subscriber count includes all active subscribers for each committed speed, regardless of the advertised speed that they subscribe to. The provider is required to upgrade customers in the sample set at no charge to at least the committed speed during the testing period, regardless of the subscribed tier. The test subjects need to meet only the committed performance, not the advertised one. So again, I see there, if as you're, I thought you would have to get random subscribers in the committed tier, but it's making it sound here like that's not the case. Like you would get random subscribers regardless of what tier they're subscribed to. Let's say they're subscribed. Let's say you've got one that's subscribed to 100 meg symmetrical. You got one that's subscribed to a gig, and maybe you've got that one that's subscribed to 5 gig symmetrical. You would then have to do that performance testing, and you'd have to upgrade the 100 meg symmetrical to a gig. And as far as the guy that's higher, I don't know if you have to downgrade them. Probably not. I don't think that would be right. But maybe you just have to make sure that all of them, the guy that you upgraded to a gig, the guy that's already a gig, maybe the guy that's 5 gig, you just have to make sure that all of them can hit the committed speed of 1 gig, if that was what you had committed, let's say, in your application. Sampling. Every last mile subgrantee must test a random sample of their active subscribers. The test subjects at grant-supported customer locations every 6 months. Test subjects must be randomly selected from among the provider's active subscribers in each committed speed tier. So again, if you just have one committed speed tier, then that's what you're testing. But if you have multiple, you've got to do those. And again, it sounds like even if they're subscribed to a package that is not at that committed speed, then you still have to test them and upgrade those that are lower. And that would be a temporary thing. And whether you have to inform them or not, maybe you can inform them and say, hey, congratulations, you're going to be given gig service for the next week. You could mention, I suppose, that you're going to be doing just mandated testing, or you could just say, hey, congratulations, and enjoy it while you got it. And if you want to keep it, then let us know after this week, and we'll upgrade you permanently. So that's, I guess, a marketing ploy there. Carriers may use inducements to encourage subscribers to participate in testing. Now, there's different ways to do testing, as we'll see here as we read through this. But one way is that you can, let's say, send a device to that subscriber that would go in their home, and they would connect that up, and then you do the testing that way. But you could also do it through the CPE. And I think if you're doing it through the CPE, you don't necessarily need to get their approval on that. The way I was reading through this says, however, to ensure that the selection remains random, carriers must offer the same inducement to all randomly selected subscribers in the areas for which participating subscribers are required for the carrier to conduct testing. So again, it's a random selection of customers, and then if you're going to give them an inducement to do that testing, then it has to be given to everybody so that you don't want some people to decline. Inducements may include upgrades to the committed speed. For example, if a provider has committed to a gig symmetrical service, but one of the locations in the sample set only subscribes to 200 by 20, the provider may offer a speed upgrade. But again, I think that would just have to be a temporary thing. And whether you'd have to notify them of that, it doesn't necessarily say that. I think that would only be if you were, again, having them get involved in the testing, which would mean, again, sending them a piece of equipment that they have to hook up. And we'll see here as we read through this. That's what I was reading the first time I went through that. That's how I thought that made sense. 3.5, sorry, semi-annual measurement period and alignment with semi-annual reports. To avoid duplicative data, measurement sample sets must rely on the BEAD locations reported to the National Broadband Map. The sample set is to be drawn from the locations available for the service as of date 7 months prior to the semi-annual report due date. For example, a semi-annual report due date on January 31, 26 reflects the performance of locations reported to the FCC broadband data collection available as of June 30th, 2025. And the broadband map data tends to be about 6 months. And you see here they're saying 7 months roughly behind, because there's a period of time that internet service providers need to be reporting that data as to what locations they cover, what the speeds are, those kinds of things. And then it takes a while for that to get into the map. The provider may conduct the performance measurements for one sample set during any single week after generating the list of locations. So that's basically, they've got this extended period of time that they can do this testing, and then they have to pick 1 week that they're going to do that testing, and it's all got to be done then. Eligible entities, and that's the states, should allow providers at least 120 days between the as-of date of the National Broadband Map and the submission deadline. Measurement methodology. Providers may rely on TR69 or TR369. Those are two standards that allow data collection from devices. Allows basically, you have a server, what is it? Access. I can't remember the acronym, but there's a server that collects the TR69 data, and also you can use that. You can use TR69 to make changes to devices. Basically, the devices, they phone home to that server, an ACS. Sorry, it's called an ACS server, and the TR69 devices, like I say, kind of phone home to that server. They can get their configuration data. Let's say if it was this was very popular with DSL, because you had no way to control those devices. So the DSL device would connect to the ACS server, get its configuration, and that can work with some other technologies as well. And it works here with doing this testing. So it talks about that, relying on those kinds of protocols, CPE WAN management protocols, rely on custom software on a residential gateway supplied to the customer, or install dedicated network measurement devices. So the custom software on residential gateway supplied to the customer could be, if you're providing a router, for example, you could have the custom software in there that would do the testing. And in that case, I think, is where you don't necessarily need to let them know, hey, we're testing this week. And then it mentions also a separate piece of equipment, a dedicated network measurement device. To minimize the burden on providers and subscribers, providers are encouraged to plan for speed and latency measurements that rely on capabilities built into optical network terminal, or ONT, or other customer premise equipment, such as a residential gateway, rather than installing additional measurement devices at subscriber locations. So they would prefer that the equipment manufacturer, let's say, support this testing where they're providing the ONT, that's this piece of customer premises equipment, or the CPE that would be at the customer's home on a fiber device connection that would be at their home, that would then connect them up to the fiber. In a sense, it's the CPE, or that connects them to the fiber. And another example would be a cable modem. That's what would connect you up to the cable modem service. So you've got an ONT on the fiber side, you've got a cable modem on the cable modem side. And those devices, or as it mentions here, a residential gateway, where you've got a modem and router in one, it would be best to have the testing be done through there so that there's little, it's easier. It's be easier, obviously, on the service provider, because when they do their sample, they'll know that everybody has got that device, assuming that everybody has that device. Now, sometimes those residential gateways, the customer wants to get their own Wi-Fi router. So you'd want to make sure that it's on whatever it is that's connecting them up, the ONT or the cable modem. And that would be better than, again, having to send out these or have everybody have a test device in their home already. And then, you're having to pay for that, and they've got that device in their home. In addition to everything else they've got, that's not the best way to go. However, providers may choose to deploy separate measurement hardware devices for some or all locations in the sample set. Providers need to obtain consent from their subscriber if they deploy measurement hardware on customer premises. So like I was saying here, I think it's just when you are going to provide this measurement testing, all it does is do this performance test. I think you then need to notify them. Consent cannot be made a condition of service, but providers may offer subscribers a uniform financial incentive. Since software-based performance measurements impose no burden on the subscriber, do not require a technician visit, do not collect user data, and many providers already routinely conduct such tests as part of their network management, the provider may perform software-based tests using CPE furnished by the provider without obtaining subscriber consent. So again, it's pretty clear that if you provided the CPE and it can do the testing, you don't need to then notify your customer that you're going to do the testing. Measurement period. Speed and latency testing must be conducted for 1 week, repeated at each measurement interval, with a default of two measurement periods per year, unless the state requires more frequent testing of no more than quarterly. In those weeks, testing must be performed between the hours of 6 p.m. and 12 a.m. local time each day. So they're taking what would generally be considered prime time, the time that the networks are most busy. That has shifted a little bit over time, especially since COVID forced a lot of people to be working from home, and there were a lot of students at home too, but a lot of folks that are working from home. Some are still there working from home. So the usage has gone up during the midday, as well as just people that are, used to watch TV during the day over their normal cable TV or antenna, whatever they're doing. Now maybe they're streaming during the day. So some of that has changed. There is quite a bit of usage going on during the day, but I think this is still the prime time of activity when most of the family's home. You've got kids home from school, you got both parents home from work, and people are doing entertainment kinds of things in the evening over the internet, whether that be watching, streaming TV, or gaming or whatever. So this I think, is the right time to be testing that as far as the most burden on the network. And that would include weekends. Testing for all locations in a single committed speed tier in a single state or territory must be done during the same week. So you can't pick different weeks for the different speed tiers or the locations. If a provider has more than one committed speed tier in a state or territory, testing for each speed tier can be conducted during different weeks. So you don't need to do everything at once, which is good. So if you've got 3 different speed tiers, you can do 3 different weeks as you're doing those tests. No prioritization of measurement traffic. That's pretty clear. So you can't, as you're doing this measurement, you can't be prioritizing through, prioritizing that testing protocol or whatever you're doing there to make sure that gets through better than your standard kind of traffic. That's the point there. And it talks about the internet exchange points here. Again, this all comes from the prior testing that the FCC had put together for RDOF and CAFII. So there are different internet exchange points or IXPs that as you're doing the testing, you'd be connecting up to these IXPs to be able to perform that testing. So that's what that's about, as far as that's kind of your endpoint as you're testing speeds and latency. Speed testing. Speed test is a single measurement of download or upload speed of 10 to 15 seconds duration between a test subject location and a specific remote server location. And I think they're talking there about the IXPs. For speed testing, a provider must conduct a minimum of 1 test per testing hour in each direction. That's download and upload, and start at the beginning of each test hour. If the consumer application traffic load is greater than 1% of the committed speed tier in the relevant direction, the provider may defer the affected test for 1 minute and reevaluate whether the load exceeds the threshold before retrying the test. For example, for a committed speed of 100 meg, the default cross-traffic threshold would be 1 meg. Provider may choose a higher threshold. This load check, and retry must continue at 1 minute intervals until the speed test can be run or the 1 hour test window ends and the test for that hour is canceled. So this would be an indication, obviously, that there's an issue on the network, not enough bandwidth maybe. So it's oversubscribed. So if you are unable to complete the test because you're trying this every minute and you've got, and it doesn't seem like that much, right? If you're at 100 meg and you're 1%, I guess that does, well, yeah, the lower it is, the harder it is going to be to do that. But you can put a higher number. So again, but if you can't complete the test, that would be kind of indication that you are maybe oversubscribed. Required download speed and required upload speed. For all projects, the required download speed or required upload speed is the speed that the provider committed to as part of the subgrantee agreement. To comply with the speed standard, a provider's certified test results for each state or territory and speed tier must show that 80% of the upload measurements are at or above 80% of the required upload speed, and same with the download measurements. For example, for priority projects that have committed to 100 by 20, 80% of the measurements must meet or exceed 80 by 16. So again, that's 80% of your measurements must be at 80% of 100 by 20, which would be 80 by 16. Or if you were looking at a gig symmetrical, it would be 800 by 800, right? So that's pretty clear. Latency testing. For latency testing, a provider must conduct a minimum of 1 test per minute, 60 tests per hour. So you're doing, basically every minute you're doing a test. For each testing hour, if the consumer load during a latency test exceeds 200,000 bits per second downstream, the provider may cancel a test and reevaluate whether the consumer load exceeds 200,000 bits per second downstream before retrying the test in the next minute. Again, if you can't complete these tests, that's kind of an indication that you've got an issue there. To comply with the latency standard, a provider's certified test results must show for each state or territory that 95% or more of all tests of network round-trip latency are at or below 100 milliseconds when measured between the test subject and a remote server that is located at or reached by passing through an FCC-designated IXP. So I guess you have to pass through one of those internet exchange points. So latency is something that's across the board the same regardless of the technology. So it doesn't matter whether this is a fiber customer, it doesn't matter what the speed is, it doesn't matter if it's fixed wireless or satellite. And 100 milliseconds round-trip latency is not fantastic. It's not terrible. It's way better than, let's say, geosynchronous satellite, but it's not that difficult of a hurdle. Even satellite should be able to achieve this without difficulty. So that's the reason that they did that, I think, was to try to make sure that technology like fixed wireless or satellite, especially satellite, if it's low Earth orbit satellite, where you're going to be able to get faster speeds and lower latency, that those kinds of technologies could qualify for BEAD program. Reliability testing. BEAD-NOFO specifies each funded network's outages should not exceed on average 48 hours over any 365-day period, except in the case of natural disasters or other force majeure occurrence. This reliability requirement corresponds to a reliability uptime of approximately 99.5%. And that sounds pretty good, 99.5%, but it's really, in the world of reliability, it's not very good. A lot of times you hear about 3 nines or even 4 nines reliability, where you're talking about minutes or even seconds per year that a service can be down. Now, you wouldn't necessarily expect that on, let's say, a residential broadband service, that you're going to have seconds per year that it's down. But if you're talking about here, 48 hours over a 365-day period, that's some pretty good leeway there. Again, not considering any kind of natural disaster. Now, you could have a minor thing in your area that wouldn't be considered a natural disaster, like a fiber cut, right? It's not a natural disaster. Now, it could be a force majeure occurrence. I'm not sure how they qualify that in here, where it's something that you have no control over. So it's very possible that would be the case. Like, let's say you have no control over a backhoe that somebody's building. Somebody's, let's say, on a highway doing something, and they have a backhoe out there and they cut a really important piece of fiber that feeds most of your customers, or a large portion of it. You really have no control over it. So maybe that doesn't count. But again, there are going to be events that are going to be, here and there, that a DDoS attack, that would be something that could cause an outage, as far as people not being able to get certain places on the internet, that kind of thing. So there are things that can happen, but 48 hours is a pretty good amount of time. The reliability requirements correspond to a reliability uptime of approximately, I talked about that, I think 99.5%, yeah. The measurement applies separately for each technology, but across all speed tiers, and is measured across all test subjects and all sample sets. So again, it's across the board, the latency. In addition to the reliability metric, providers shall also supply a count of all funded locations that experience continuous outages exceeding 8 hours. For example, a time to repair of greater than 8 hours beyond subscribers in areas affected by natural disasters, and the 80th percentile duration of such 8-hour or longer outages. So again, that's a long time to be out. So what caused that? Again, a fiber cut can cause that. Is that something that counts against you? It says, let's see. Yeah, beyond areas affected by natural disasters. It doesn't mention the force majeure, so maybe a fiber cut or something like that here would apply where it wouldn't so much on that section that we were just reading. And then the 80th percentile. So, if you think about it this way, again, that's kind of a bell. I talked about this the other day with the bell chart on something else. That's your bell chart, and you've got, I'm assuming on the left side of that bell chart, you would have 8 hours because it's saying it's anything 8 hours or more, or I guess greater than 8 hours. So 8 hours plus would be on your left side, all the way up to whatever your highest number of hours is, and then the 80th percentile would be wherever that falls. Oops, excuse me, microphone. Sorry about that. Wherever that falls in the in your bell chart, that 80 percentile, that could be, let's say, 12 hours. If maybe 13 hours was your highest. I can't do the math here, but that's what that would be. So it sounds like you have to put that figure, that 80th percentile, as well there. See if there's anything else I'd highlighted. Yeah, providers must complete the reliability for the past 180 days preceding the submission of the performance report to the state. To allow for analysis, the subgrantee may choose a 180-day period that ends no more than 30 calendar days before the report submission. Failure of the test infrastructure. All test results must be retained and published as described in the transparency section below. Providers cannot delete, trim, edit, or otherwise exclude any test measurements. So whatever you're doing as you're doing this test measurement stuff, it's not like you can say, it does give you it does say you can, if you can't meet a particular period, like an hour period, and then you have to try this again, you can try it again, but you can't not report the hour that things didn't work. So you have to report all the test results. If a provider knows or suspects that the testing infrastructure has failed or has negatively impacted test results, the provider may submit evidence of the test infrastructure failure with sufficiently detailed information to the state and the NTIA. Flexibility afforded to states, eligible entities. So states may strengthen the measurement requirements described here, for example, by increasing the size of the sample set or detailing corrective actions, but may not change the speed and reliability requirements spelled out in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. States may choose how and when they want to receive the performance measurements. For example, whether data files should be uploaded to a portal or be stored on the provider site only, so long as they can submit complete and accurate semi-annual reports, including required performance measurement reporting. So all the testing and stuff goes back to the state, it looks like, and then the state's going to report back to the NTIA. Transparency. Each provider shall document the methodology, standards, and parameters used for their performance measurements applicable to BEAD-funded networks, preferably available on or through a link on their network management practices page. So this will be, how they're doing this will be transparent to everyone, the public, because it's supposed to be on their website on a public page. In particular, the description must include at least, and then there's some info here, vendor, product name, for example, on their software. So that might be, for example, the ONT vendor, could be a Nokia device or a Calix device or something like that has built-in testing. If applicable, the Internet Engineering Task Force requests for comments, number of concurrent transmission or TCP connections used for measuring the download and upload speed, any warm-up period for throughput measurements. So all of that needs to be available. For each round of performance testing conducted, providers must publish their throughput, latency, and reliability measurement results at the location level as a CSV file linked from their network management practice page, retaining at least 3 years of data. So, again, publicly available. The measurement report, including the methodology, standards, parameters, and data, must include a certification as to the accuracy of the information reported by an appropriate official of the filer, along with the title of the certifying official. The certifying official must be a corporate officer of the service provider with supervisory and budgetary authority over network operations in all relevant service areas. And I think the point there, well, number one, they want to make sure that it's somebody who they can reach out to easily, somebody who could, there could be consequences for if they are not truthful in this filing. And also here, somebody who can make a difference. So if they're having to sign something that says, here are testing results, and they're seeing that those testing results are not great, but they have the budgetary authority to fix whatever the problem is. I think that's the point there. Compliance for speed, and there's stuff on that. A lot of this is repeated. I wasn't going to read through it again. So it talks about a lot of the points that we talked about here in the prior area. So, and then in this appendix in here on how to randomize your locations. So there's certain ways you would do that, or a certain way you would do that. It talks about that. Gets fairly technical and involved here. Again, people who have been doing the CAFII or RDOF testing have already had to figure this out. So I'm sure you can find more information on how to do this, but that is right there on how you would have to do that randomized testing. And there's Appendix B, policy of a notice change log. So that's just a little thing there. That's the end of it right there. So again, it should be familiar to some, totally unfamiliar to others. So I understand anybody who looked at this and said, "Oh no, I have to do this." But it's not the first time anyone has had to do this. So again, you should be able to find some assistance. There should be help out there somewhere, and I'm sure the NTIA and your local broadband office can help point you to resources that can help with this testing. Again, it would certainly make sense now with BEAD, and they may have already done a lot of, I think some have already done this as far as with the RDOF and CAF2 stuff, that the CPE manufacturers would have this capability built in to be able to do the testing, and with more networks coming that are going to be having to be doing this testing, I would certainly hope that all CPE that's sold here would have the ability to be able to have that capability on that equipment, so to make it a little bit easier on the provider. And again, then you don't have to contact your subscriber and say, hey, we're going to be testing during this week. We need to get your approval. We need to send somebody out there, and they're going to bring a testing device. That's a real pain. So I don't see that being a good option for most of these operators that are going to be doing that. Appreciate you joining me today. If this was interesting or helpful, please give me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to our channel. Click the subscribe button. Make sure the bell is rung, and you'll be notified when I'm live. Thanks for joining me for Broadband News, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.